It's Thursday, it's the 10th of July. You're watching ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gon-young. We begin right here in this country. At the floor leaders of the ruling and opposition parties plan to pass a bill later this month designed to prevent a repeat of a tragedy like April's deadly ferry accident. Speaking after their first meeting with President Park since she took office early last year, the ruling party floor leader Lee Wan-koo and his opposition counterpart Park said they have decided to approve the bill at a plenary session scheduled for July 16th. Now, during their meeting at the nation's top office earlier today, President Park had asked for bipartisan support behind her government and public sector reform-related bills put forth in the aftermath of the ferry disaster, as well as a series of economy-related bills. The two parties in response said they will seek to pass the bills next month. And to the main opposition's request for the president to reconsider two controversial cabinet nominations, President Park said that she will take that request into consideration. And with only 3 weeks left until crucial by-elections, the nation's two main political parties are gearing up for a rematch after no clear winner emerged in last month's local elections. 15 parliamentary seats will be up for grabs. Our Ji Myung-gil has more on the upcoming by-elections.
The race for the July 30th parliamentary by-elections got underway Thursday with 2 days of candidate registration at the National Election Commission. 15 assembly seats are up for grabs, the largest number in Korea's by-election history. Campaigning will officially start on July 17th and continue for 2 weeks until Election Day. For Korea's two main political parties, the by-elections will be far more than an opportunity to expand their presence in the National Assembly, as neither one emerged as a clear victor after local elections on June 4th. Currently, the ruling Saenuri Party holds 147 of the 300 parliamentary seats, while the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has 126. The ruling party is vying to gain a majority of the vacant assembly seats, while the main opposition party is looking to garner a win in important constituencies in Seoul and the surrounding Gyeonggi-do province. Seoul's Dongjak-bi district is considered strategically important to both parties, as the district's parliamentary seat is not only in the heart of Seoul, but is the former district of 7-term lawmaker and Saenuri heavyweight Chung Mong-jun. Experts say that as the 15 constituencies are spread around the nation, with 6 being in the metropolitan area, including 1 in Seoul, the mini general election could act as a referendum on the government. In appealing to voters, the Saenuri Party will emphasize the need for a national reform drive and supporting the president, while the unified opposition party will continue to highlight government's mishandling of April's ferry tragedy. But unless the main opposition party can provide viable alternatives to the ruling party's policies, neither party will have a clear advantage. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, moving on to a proposal made by North Korea. North Korea has proposed holding a round of working-level talks with South Korea next week to discuss its plans to send athletes and a cheering squad to the Incheon Asian Games this fall. Well, North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday that the reclusive state would like to hold the talks in the inter-Korean border village of Panmunjom next Tuesday. North Korea had said earlier this week that it would send a cheering squad to the upcoming Asian Games in South Korea's port city of Incheon, slated for September, this in an effort to improve inter-Korean relations. If a North Korean cheering squad were to participate in the Incheon Asian Games, it would be the first such dispatch by the regime in 9 years. The United States has confirmed that North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea. The latest launches on Wednesday Korea time marks Pyongyang's 13th projectile launch this year alone. Well, a U.S. official said that the firing violates numerous UN Security Council resolutions, which ban the North from any ballistic missile activity. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki also voiced concern, saying such provocative acts heighten tension in the regime and will not provide North Korea with the prosperity and security it claims to seek. The official urged Pyongyang to refrain from provocations and stick to its international obligations and commitments. Meanwhile, the top diplomats of the U.S. and China are holding their second day of talks in Beijing on a range of issues, including cybersecurity, maritime disputes, the Chinese currency, and an investment treaty. So a whole lot there. The two sides agreed that the annual meeting by emphasizing potential for cooperation, but issues that divide the world's two biggest economies reportedly dominated the discussions on Wednesday. Here's our Hwang Sung-hee with this report.
Chinese President Xi Jinping opened the annual China-U.S. Strategic and Economic Dialogue on Wednesday by addressing the differences between their two countries. Stressing that confrontation would be a disaster, Xi reiterated calls for a new model relationship.
China-U.S. confrontation to the two countries and the world would definitely be a disaster. Under these circumstances, we on both sides should look far into the distance, strengthen and persist on cooperation, and avoid confrontation.
The two-day talks in Beijing include discussions on China's currency, North Korea's nuclear program, and China's maritime disputes with its neighbors. Washington, which has been critical of Beijing's territorial claims, said it welcomes a peaceful emergence of China.
The United States does not seek to contain China. We welcome the emergence of a peaceful, stable, prosperous China.
But the two sides had clear differences on the establishment of the China-led Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. Washington views it as Beijing's attempt to dominate the Asian currency market. This divide poses a problem to South Korea. It received a Chinese invitation to join the bank upon President Xi's visit to Seoul last week. With no clear answer given just yet, the matter is reportedly under discussion in South Korea, as the U.S. opposes its key ally taking part in any China-led project that could alter the political landscape in Northeast Asia. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Typhoon Noguri has now been downgraded to a typical typhoon from a super typhoon. And although Korea's southern Jeju Island is now free from the typhoon's influence, neighboring Japan has been hit hard. It's already caused 2 deaths and widespread damage. Here's our Park Ji-won.
Typhoon Noguri swept upon the Japanese mainland on Thursday morning. The Japanese Meteorological Agency says the tropical storm center made landfall on Kyushu, southwestern Japan at around 7 a.m. local time. Although downgraded to a typical typhoon late Wednesday from its earlier super typhoon status, the storm dumped torrential rain on Okinawa, Japan's southernmost prefecture. Nearly 200 millimeters of rain fell on Okinawa in just 3 hours on Wednesday. Nagano Prefecture in central Japan also saw roughly 70 millimeters of rain per hour, the heaviest rain recorded in the region in the month of July.
Torrential rain and flooding are forecast across the south and west due to the typhoon. We advise the public to take the necessary precautions against flooding and torrential rain. Please also be aware of strong gusty winds and high waves.
At least 3 people have been killed due to the typhoon, including a teenage boy during a landslide in central Japan and an 83-year-old man swept into a swollen river in Fukushima. Some regional airports have been closed and train services have been canceled in the hardest hit areas of Kyushu. Officials in Japan say the storm could still bring heavy rain and violent winds to eastern Japan, including Tokyo, by Friday. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Well, let's shift our focus to the World Cup in Brazil. We now know the 2 teams that will be competing in Sunday's final. Argentina will face off against Germany in a repeat of the 1986 and 1990 finals after the South Americans beat the Netherlands 4-2 on penalties after they finished 0-0 after 120 minutes. While Argentina's goalkeeper was the hero of the day, saving 2 of the Dutch players' penalties, Germany will be the strong favorites in the final after they thrashed the host nation Brazil 7-1 in Tuesday's semifinal. Well, Brazil and the Netherlands, however, cannot pack up and go home, though, as they have to play the third-place playoff on Saturday local time. Meanwhile, here in Korea, the head coach of Korea's national football team has resigned, saying he was set on stepping down after the team's elimination from the Brazil World Cup. Well, it follows just a week after the Korea Football Association suggested he stay until the end of his contract, which runs until the Asian Cup in January. And Hong Yong-bo called a press conference to say he should be held responsible for the squad's poor performance in Brazil. Hong was criticized for only selecting players familiar with him for the World Cup, regardless of their form or fitness or even game time in their respective clubs, and recently was under fire for a real estate transaction that he made during the World Cup, leading up to the World Cup season. Now, Korea could only muster a single point during the World Cup, which was a draw against Russia and 2 losses in Brazil.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
It's been 2 months since Korea's central bank signaled a rate rise down the road, but it seems like they have changed their mind along the way, saying there are more negative factors than positive that could hurt the nation's moderate pace of economic recovery. For this month, it left the key rate unchanged at 2.5%. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Following a monthly monetary policy meeting on Thursday, Korea's top central banker opened up the possibility of a rate cut. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ji-yeol said that while current economic conditions indicate a moderate pace of recovery, there are bigger downside risks than upward potential that could weigh on the domestic economy. For this month, the bank kept the rate steady at 2.5% for the 14th straight month. The central bank was under mounting pressure from the government and private institutions to lower its key interest rate to spur growth. Finance Minister nominee Choi Kyung-hwan has been urging the bank to seek easier monetary policies. The yield for benchmark 3-year government bonds also hit a new annual low recently, reflecting market expectations for a downward interest rate adjustment. Meanwhile, the central bank cut its growth outlook for this year by 0.2 percentage points to 3.8%, saying the revision is largely due to the negative impact the ferry tragedy in April had on the nation's already sluggish domestic demand. It also cut its growth forecast for next year by 0.2 percentage points to 4%. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Well, over in the U.S., the Federal Reserve has set a tentative date for the end of its massive bond buying stimulus program. The minutes of last month's policy meeting by the U.S. Federal Open Market Committee show that the Fed plans to end its bond purchases by this October, citing improvements in the U.S. economy. Fed officials also discussed how and when to raise interest rates, but were divided on the issue of inflation, which is a primary indicator of economic recovery. The Fed rolled back its bond buying program 3 times last year, citing improvements in economic activity as well as employment. Korea's export prices fell for the 4th straight month in June on the strengthening local currency trend. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the nation's export prices dropped 0.2% last month from a month before, marking the lowest level in 6.5 years. Well, the drop means that local exporters are making less money when converting their export bills from dollars to won. Import prices, on the other hand, remained flat in June due to a hike in oil prices, which offset the strong won trend. The Korean won appreciated by 0.5% against the greenback in June. Well, if you want to buy a bag or a pair of shoes by a luxury brand, but you can't afford it, you may be tempted to turn to counterfeit goods. But now there are efforts to apply international standards to the illegal production, consumption, and distribution of forged products. Our Kwon So-ah has more on these knockoffs.
These appear to be bazookas, the official football of the Brazil World Cup, but they are actually fakes, and all of them were smuggled into Korea from China. It's just one example of the growing market for counterfeit goods in Korea. The list of more than 131,000 fake products confiscated since 2010 includes watches, bags, drugs, and ties like these. Fighting the market for counterfeit products is an international problem. The global damage caused by counterfeiting amounts to around $600 billion annually. To tackle the issue, global experts are in Korea this week to find international standards for countermeasures against forged products, including authentication solutions, which are special techniques for preventing counterfeiting.
We're developing 2D and 3D barcode techniques and many other tools that make copying impossible. We are continuing with the registration of patents in order for our techniques to be recognized globally.
Kwangin-sa is one of the many private enterprises that specialize in techniques for preventing forged products, from intricate designs for labels, holograms, and watermarks, to invisible printing, which makes it possible to check the authenticity of a product through UV light. But the company says it's facing difficulties, as security techniques aren't as high a priority in Korea as they are in other countries.
Our company owns 2 patents, and each year we try to register more, but the applications are often not accepted.
The Korean Agency for Technology and Standards hopes that the introduction of international standards for authentication solutions will give a boost to SMEs in the security industry and make the fake market disappear. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Well, the Bank of Korea has cut its growth outlook for this year and said inflation was picking up more slowly than expected after leaving interest rates unchanged. But as our Hwang Ji-hye reported earlier, the move came as a bit of a surprise to some, as the nation's central bank had hinted at the possibility of a rate cut down the road. Let's take an in-depth look. Dr. Kim Byung-ju joins me live in the studio. Dr. Kim, so how big of a surprise is this rate freeze by the Bank of Korea, or would you say the majority of analysts had anticipated the move?
Well, what should I say here? The thing is, in the Korean media reports, as we have noted, majority seemed to be talking about, like yesterday and a few days ago, talking about the possible rate cut this time in today's meeting. And also, as Hwang Ji-hye reported, bond market participants was also mostly they were betting on the cut option here as well, showing the bond rates going down ahead of time of this decision. But however, economists, I think including myself, as we talked about a few days ago, were talking mostly about the need to keep the rate in place. So I don't know what we can say about the surprise itself. According to the media reports, it is a surprise, but then again, in the minds of those of us who are watching the long-term, economic trend, which we covered a few days ago, this was not a surprise at all. But the thing is, clearly, the Deputy Prime Minister nominee, Choi Kyung-won, has been talking very actively about, doing everything possible to lift the economic cycle up. A lot of people were indeed expecting this cut this time. So in that sense, I suppose it's a little bit of surprise.
Right. I understand that those advocating a rate cut, they emphasize their concerns over the strengthening won as well as the weakening Korean economy.
Right, indeed.
Or a weak recovery, rather, right?
Right, indeed. The weak recovery we covered a few days ago, but the strengthening of won itself was actually a big concern that we haven't talked about a few days ago. That was a big argument indeed. A lot of people were saying, those people who are advocating the rate cut this time, they were saying we need to cut the rate because Korea, among the leading economies, has the highest rate here. And because of that, Korea's currency won has gained unreasonably, almost solely because all other major currencies actually have lost their values here this time for the past few months. So they're saying, rate cut is very necessary this time, to make sure that Korea's export businesses are not hurt. And they were also adding the case of Samsung here, as we discussed also this week. Samsung's case, showing not as much of desirable numbers, had a lot to do with the strengthening of the won, they were saying. So this is an indication that why we need a rate cut this time. So indeed, the argument advocating for the cut itself was considerably strong this time.
Right. For those who are arguing for a rate freeze, were they thinking about the independence of monetary policy making, perhaps?
Well, at least myself is included there. Yeah, indeed. I don't know whether the majority was thinking about that or not, but indeed it was very important. This is like a fourth month for the tenure of the relatively new central bank governor.
EGL.
Right, EGL. Right. And a lot was riding on his inauguration because there was a view that his predecessor's performance was not as desirable, and they were talking about the growing importance of the regaining importance of the independence of the central bank this time. So if we had indeed followed the expectation of the market of cutting the rate this time, a lot of reaction would have been saying, well, here comes again, once again, another governor who's eager to work very closely with the government that has this political urge to respond to public opinion and public perception rather than just looking at the numbers more objectively. So indeed, by keeping the rate in place, actually for fourth month in a row, I think the new governor, relatively new governor, has demonstrated the independence of the central bank for now. But the thing is, now analysts are saying every time new governor comes in, sometime between like a 2-month and 4-month time, they actually introduce a rate change. So they're saying he's going all the way max this time, and those people are saying...
And by the 5th month,
right,
there will be a change.
That's what they're saying.
Well, also the BOK cut the growth forecast for this year, revised down from 4% to 3.8%. Now, is there now a greater likelihood that a rate cut is in store for us next month?
Well, that's what the media reports are indicating, and I think including ourselves, which we just had right before this. That is the expectation in the media. But I don't know. In my case, I'm remaining more neutral here because there is reason to expect otherwise. The thing is, like, it was only 2 months ago when the new governor was talking about the possibility of actually raising the interest rate rather than cutting it. And the reason for that is because the United States is expected to raise its rate by the end of the year. Right. And when that happens, with this a lot of liquidity in the global market, possibly there will be just giant big backdraft of backflow of the capital away from the emerging or the large markets, including ourselves, back to the United States. So if we cut our rate now, there's a great possibility for being hit big time by this backflow of the capital. So it's not a really wise strategy to continuously talk about this rate cut in thinking about the global context here. So indeed, there are all these cards still laid on the table, and I don't think one can actually set firm position about what needs to be done in August or September yet.
But all in all, we should leave a safety net for us to, I suppose, backdraw on.
Right,
all
absolutely.
Right? Yeah, all right. Dr. Kim Byung-ju, thank you so much for today, and we'll speak to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Well, we did talk about the Typhoon Noguri being downgraded to a typical typhoon from a super typhoon, but let's turn to Michelle Park for more on this weather. Michelle, all I can say is it's really hot outside. Is this an impact from the typhoon impact?
That's right. Although the typhoon has passed us, it has left us with this hot steam in the atmosphere now, which is causing the scorching hot weather. And right now there are lots of regions where we have heat wave alert in effect, including here in Seoul. And not only that, the heat will stay with us as we move into the night, causing the tropical night phenomena. And also the heat brings high UV levels. Even with this layer of fog in the atmosphere, we have a strong sun shining, so make sure to apply sunblock, drink lots of water, and try to stay indoors to prevent heat stroke. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 34 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 31 and 30 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over to 26, while Dokdo and Mangkungang both tops into the high 20s. Well, that's all for now. Michelle, Park, and back to you, Ganya.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for that. And that is your business today on this Thursday. Thank you for watching, and do stay cool. Do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.